If you clicked on this video, chances are you're someone who's working to become a better leader, a more authentic person, and someone who truly connects with others. You're here because you know that there's more to life than just sucking air and dying, more to life than just putting on a brave face. You're ready to embrace the power of vulnerability. You probably are a person who leads with strength, but feel the weight of keeping up a facade. Maybe you're tired of surface level relationships and conversations, and you are craving deeper, more meaningful connections. Or perhaps you've realized that true strength comes from being real, not perfect. Well, today we're diving into the life-changing power of vulnerability. The vulnerability itself is essential for growth. So vulnerability, the word comes from a Latin word that literally means to wound. So our vulnerability is our capacity to be wounded. The reality is that as human beings, we're all vulnerable from birth until death. But when we're hurt in childhood and the vulnerability is too painful to bear, we will try to shut down our vulnerability completely. This might be why you believe the most common myths that vulnerability is a weakness, or you just don't do it, or that vulnerability is flat out TMI. And for example, by being right, if I'm right, then I'm powerful and I can't be wounded anymore. But when we do that, we stop growing. Everything in nature grows only where it's vulnerable. If you look at a crab, inside a hard shell, it can never grow. It has to shed that shell and make itself very vulnerable to the elements to be able to grow. Or you look at a tree, it doesn't grow where it's hard and thick, does it? It grows where it's soft and green and vulnerable. Vulnerability is absolutely essential for growth. And for vulnerability, you got to let go of those defenses. You got to put down the walls, such as being right, that you developed as a child in order to protect yourself from the pain. Now, before we dive in, here are a few Bible verses that really highlight the strength of vulnerability. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says that my power is made perfect in weakness. It tells us that God sees strength in our acknowledgement and embracing our weakness. We connect better to others and to God the moment we decide to stop striving for perfection and to be real honest and open and transparent. Or James 4:6, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Grace is the power to change and overcome. It is the unmerited favor. It's the idea of overcoming our weaknesses and bad habits. See, being prideful is one of the most dangerous things we can walk in. Or maybe James 5:16, admit your faults to one another and pray for each other so that you may be healed. See, vulnerability is one of the key elements to seeing true healing and seeing true freedom. See, vulnerability can be emotionally healing when we admit our faults and shortcomings and peel back the layers and get support from each other. This isn't saying go tell a stranger on the streets your deepest, darkest secrets, opening all the skeletons in your closet, but I'll better break that down later on in the video, so be sure to stick around for that. And then you see James 3:2, we all stumble in many ways. Admitting our mistakes makes us more relatable. Or you see in 2 Corinthians 6:11, it talks about being vulnerable, meaning having an open heart and how we act, talk, share, and feel. Or Ephesians 4:25, it says, having put away falsehood, let one another speak the truth with his neighbor. God calls us to be transparent and vulnerable with each other. Now let's debunk the three most common myths about vulnerability. Understanding and debunking these myths will help you grow and lead better in your family, business, and community. So myth 1, vulnerability is a weakness. And let's set the record straight right now. Vulnerability is not a weakness. It's a measure of true courage. It takes immense bravery to expose oneself to potential harm or criticism without knowing the outcome. Vulnerability is about taking emotional risk, being honest about our feelings and experience, and it's truly a super strength. When we show vulnerability, we open the door to deeper connections and greater innovation and creativity. I'd also say it's a gift. You don't owe anyone the gift of opening the door to the depths of your heart and soul. I've seen it time and time again in my own life and in the lives of those around me and my clients. The moments we dare to be vulnerable, that we dare greatly, are the moments we grow the most. And then myth 2, I don't do vulnerability. Some people, maybe you, think that you can avoid vulnerability altogether. But here's the truth. Vulnerability is an inherent part of the human experience. Like I mentioned earlier, we spend our whole entire lives being vulnerable. So denying it is like denying an integral part of our very existence. Whether we acknowledge it or not, vulnerability is here. It's always here. Ignoring it only leads to emotional numbness, disassociation, and disconnection. Embrace it. Accept that vulnerability is a part of you, and watch how it transforms your relationships and your whole life from the inside out. And then the third myth is vulnerability means letting it all hang out. Vulnerability doesn't mean oversharing or spilling all your secrets or TMI to just anyone. It's about sharing with those who have earned your trust and can offer empathy and support. It's about discerning when, where, and with whom to be vulnerable with. This ensures that our vulnerability leads to meaningful connections and not unnecessary harm or discomfort. Think of working with me as your coach or being a part of this community here at the Better Than Best Academy as a trusted, safe space. Again, it's kind of like Vegas without the gambling. What happens here stays here. This is a judgment-free zone where you can share your wildest thoughts, fears. You're not going to scare me off, and you're not going to scare God off. I know a lot of times we get into these circles and we think, oh, we have to be polished and perfect, but that's wrong. It's completely wrong, friend. You can come exactly how you are, flaws, imperfections, pimples and all, and God already knows you. He sees you, and that you are enough, that you are valuable. And I really want you to understand this and grasp this. And vulnerability really is your greatest super strength if you're able to tap into it. All right. Now I want to get a little bit interactive. I have some questions and exercises to help you apply these principles to your life. So here are a few discussion questions. The first one being, which of these myths do you relate to most? How have these beliefs shaped your attitude toward vulnerability? Identify specific instances where this belief influenced your behaviors. How did this impact your relationships and your growth altogether? And then the second question, how can you reframe your perception of vulnerability from being a weakness to being a source of true strength? I want you to visualize a scenario where this belief empowers you. And then follow up to thinking, and I want you to think of a challenging situation coming up. Imagine approaching it with this new belief about vulnerability. How does this change your thoughts, feelings, and actions? All right, then I have a few exercises for you. The first one is an empathy practice. I want you to pair up with a friend, a partner, or even the next time that you have an interaction, and I want you to practice active listening and empathetic responses. Now, while this person is sharing their story or sharing what they're going through, I want you to reflect on how it feels to both express and receive vulnerability. And then the second exercise is a journaling prompt. I want you to write about a situation where you avoided vulnerability because you believed one of these myths. What was the outcome? How might the situation have been different if you had embraced vulnerability? What steps can you take to challenge these myths in your future interaction? See, vulnerability isn't something to shy away from, friend. It's something to embrace with open arms. It's your superpower. So take these insights, apply them, do the questions and the exercises, and watch how your life will change from the inside out. As always, I'm praying for you, friend. I love you. Now let's go embrace the power of vulnerability as we live better than best.